My name is Steve Collins. I am privileged to be the youth pastor of this church and some of these wonderful youth who have been helping out. And like all good youth Sunday sermons, I would like to begin with a shameless plug for my adorable children. And so up on the screen, there'll be some pictures of the kids. Just want to get you caught up on the Collins clan. Joshua turned 5 in August and has started kindergarten. There's, of course, us with Mickey. Aren't we? And there's the birthday right there. So Rebecca will turn 3 later this month, and that little one has found her voice. I tell you, we last night actually we put them to bed after the Saturday night service, and about 30 minutes past bedtime, we hear this sound coming from Rebecca from her room. And so Winnie and I kind of creep down there and down the hall, making as little noise as we can. And she's in her bed, and in one of the moments that will warm my heart forever, she's singing Jesus Loves Me. Oh. And so we, of course, didn't scold her. We just kind of let her be. What are you doing up past bedtime? No, we were like, oh, go sing. So we are enjoying life. We're loving it. So not too long ago, I had the privilege of being taught by a seminary professor. So her job is regularly to teach at a seminary and prepare the next generation and generations to come, the next wave of pastors and preachers. And she said something at that time that really resonated with me then and has stuck with me for all these years, especially when I prepare to teach. Here's what she said. She says to these soon-to-be pastors, you can be as cool can be. You can have the best hair. You can have thousands and thousands of people come and be a part of your congregation. And they can all rise up and call you cool. But unless you teach them the mighty acts of God, then when their phone rings at 3 a.m. with a diagnosis from a doctor that sends chills down to their bones, how cool you are will not matter. How cool you are will not get them through that night. What will get them through that night is to know that their God is the God that parted the Red Sea. To know that their God is the God who looked at a worthless rabble of slaves and said, you're mine. I will take you out of slavery from Egypt, and I will get you to the promised land. She concluded by saying that is what all churches in America and throughout the world need to hear and need to proclaim, and that's what we're going to talk about today. I mentioned earlier, at the earlier service, that unfortunately my father and I have never had to quite worry too much about the cool gene. It kind of passes, it passed me over. You got it, you're cool. And you can preach, so double threat right there. So today we're going to dive in to looking at some of the mighty acts of God, and to look at this God that we serve. Recently, I was driving the kids around. I don't remember where we were going. But in one of the biggest shocks of my life, my son began to cry, which is not that rare. But it's not the, you touched me, you took my toy, whiny cry. It was a sorrowful, sad cry. And so I asked him, I said, Joshua, what's the matter? And here's what he said. He said, still crying. He says, Daddy, I'm going to miss you when you're gone in the clouds. I'm going to miss you. Shocking. It immediately brought me to tears. And I knew two things right away. I knew the first, that he now has an awareness of what death is. And of course, until they're a certain age, they have no concept of death. And unfortunately, I'm not past that phase with him. The second was, it just broke my heart that he will experience that pain, that grief that comes from people around him, my passing. But right as I was experiencing this sadness myself, a wave of peace that I cannot describe, but it was awesome. This wave of peace washes over me. For I serve a God who is mighty, who is not only willing to save us, but able to save us. And I know that when my son feels that grief, he will grieve, but he will not grieve without hope. He will grieve with a hope that our God can save. And so it got me thinking about how powerful and how mighty our God really is. Because when I look around at least American culture and how mighty is our God, through our songs and through our words, God is mighty. But if we were to look at our prayers, or better yet, our lack of prayers, we are really kind of saying our God is tiny and weak. So I dug into the scriptures to explore who is this God, how mighty is he? And as I began to study, I found a phrase that's used a little roughly 70 times in the Old Testament alone. 50 of those actually in the book of Ezekiel. The name of the sermon this morning. The phrase is, "Then you will know that I am the Lord." And here's how it occurs in the scripture. A prophet or God will come talk to somebody and say, "Hey, I'm going to tell you the future. Or I'm going to display a miraculous and mighty act. Then you will know that I am the Lord." It's to deal with the power, and it's also who has the authority over whom. We're going to look at an example from 1 Kings chapter 20. Verse 13 reads this. "Meanwhile, a prophet came to Ahab, king of Israel, and announced, 'This is what the Lord says. Do you see this vast army? I will give it into your hand today, and then you will know that I am the Lord.'" This phrase occurs all the time. There's some where he's talking to the people of Israel, some where he's talking to the Egyptians. I'm going to hand down some pretty devastating plagues, and then the Egyptians will know that I am the Lord. And so we see this phrase over and over. So we're going to reflect on some passages that display God's might to serve as an encouragement and a hope to us today. So let me take you back in time. Somewhere between the year 1250 BC and 1446 BC, somewhere in there. Moses is leading God's chosen people, the Israelites, out of Egypt after 430 years of slavery. After 10 devastating plagues, Pharaoh says, "You can go." But his heart is hardened. He changes his mind. And he sends his army, the Egyptian army, after the Israelites. At that time, the Egyptian army is the strongest military might on the planet. And he sends them after the Israelites, who are great in number, but are nowhere near soldiers. They cannot fight off any army, let alone the Egyptian army. So, in front of them lays the Red Sea. Behind them lies the greatest army on the planet. And they experience fear and panic. And we're going to pick it up in Exodus chapter 14. It should be on the screen. It reads this, starting in verse 10. "As Pharaoh approached, the Israelites looked up, and there were the Egyptians marching after them. They are terrified and cried out to the Lord. They said to Moses, 'Was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us to the desert to die? What have you done to us by bringing us out of Egypt? Didn't we save you in Egypt? Leave us alone. Let us serve the Egyptians. It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the desert.' Moses answered the people, 'Do not be afraid. Stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today. The Egyptians you see today, you will never see. The Lord will fight for you. Short-term is a God who's for it. We're going to fast forward about 1,400 years. A blind man sitting by the road, begging for food. He's heard about this Jesus. He's heard what he can do. And now he hears that he's actually in the area and coming his way. And so he begins to cry out loud, "Son of David, have mercy on me." The people around him try to quiet him down. "Hey, you, shh, keep it down." He screams all louder, "Son of David, have mercy on me." This gets Jesus' attention. And the man. And we're going to pick it up in Mark 10. It's on the screen. So Mark 10 reads this, verse 51. "What do you want me to do for you?" Jesus asked him. The blind man said, "Rabbi, I want to see." "Go," said Jesus, "your faith has healed you." Immediately he received his sight and followed Jesus along the road. This day he too found out that God has authority over blindness. We're going to take a little tangent on a side note. Because when this is preached, and even today it's being preached, we focus on the miracle. And rightly so. We have a mighty God and heal blindness. But I want to just take a quick second to focus on the man's request. So we don't give this man enough credit for asking this. His request is totally insane. Who comes up, "What would you like me to do for you?" "I'd like you to make me not blind." No one comes up and asks me for that. Does anybody come up and ask you, "What would you like? What can I do for you?" What does he used to ask me for? Food? Money? To buy food? But instead, in a stunning show of faith, "I want to see." He believed that Jesus was able. He just did not know that Jesus was willing. And Jesus was both willing and able. And he heals him. Now, I cannot prove this biblically. But I have a belief that had he asked for a meal instead of his vision, that he would have received a meal and remained blind. But he prayed big because his God is big. We're going to fast forward a matter of mere months. Jesus is hanging on the cross. He's faced betrayal from some of his closest friends. He's been subjected to an illegal and phony trial. He's been beaten and executed. And in what is probably the biggest display of God's might since the creation of the heavens and the earth, 3 days later, the stone rolls away. And Jesus rises from the grave. And in doing so, the mighty, mighty act of God takes sin and death as if they were tangible items in each hand, and sin and death for you and for him, and breaks them. You see, that line, "Then you will know that I am the Lord," deals with authority. Before we talked about the blind man, we showed that Jesus has authority over physical ailments. In the book of Joshua, the sun stands still so they can continue a battle a little bit longer. In the New Testament, the disciples are on a boat. The wind and the waves come, threatening them. They panic, wake up Jesus who's sleeping. "Jesus, we're going to die. A little help here." And Jesus gets up and rebukes the wind and the waves. These are not normal things. The weather, the sun, death, blindness, these are not normal things that we have authority over. And God says, "I do. And when I display this, then you will know that I am the Lord." In closing, I want to address two very common questions that I always think of, but never really ask when a sermon like this is being preached. The first is this: does God still do miracles like this? Anybody seen a large body of water parted? Seen someone healed? Oh, I got a yes. I don't see them a lot in the news. You would think, a little something on the news. Let me share this with you. I have a cousin, my mother's niece. Her name is Stephanie. Stephanie went on a mission trip to Thailand in 2008. There's going to be some pictures up on the screen. While they were there, they encountered a man. I don't know his name. That's him. He's blind. Can't see at all. The missions team that traveled to Thailand that year laid hands on him and began to pray for him. And every day, for 7 days, his vision was restored. At the end of a week, he was completely healed. There were no TV cameras. No one said, hey, if you write me a check, then I'll ask God to heal you. There was just a group of missionaries who believe that their God is a mighty God. It's hard to see. He's on the left. He's waving goodbye to them. When I emailed my cousin Stephanie to ask her for these pictures, because I had heard her tell the story, in the subject line of the email, she wrote, once was blind, but now he sees. We serve a mighty God. The second question that often comes up is this. If God really is so mighty, why don't we always get what we pray for? Isn't that in the Bible? If you pray for it in my name, right, you'll get what you want. Is that what it says? So one thing that we teach in youth group, and Pastor Bob teaches in church, is biblical context and biblical precedent. So when I think of that question, I'm like, okay, so which one is it? Is God mighty, willing, and able? Because I don't always get what I pray for, little or big stuff. So what's the deal? So I turn to the Bible, I turn to the scriptures. Is there a biblical precedent for someone who absolutely has the faith they believe that God can do this? Prays for something and does not get it. Is there an example in the Bible like that? And then in 2 Corinthians I found one. This is written by Paul. Let's read it. 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 7 to 10. It reads this. Therefore, in order to keep me from becoming conceited, I was given a thorn in my flesh, a messenger of Satan to torment me. 3 times I pleaded with the Lord to take it away from me. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you. For my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me. That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weaknesses, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, in difficulties. For when I am weak, then I am strong. Paul was praying. Scholars believe he was actually suffering from visual impairment, maybe blind, partially, completely, we don't know. That's a guess. That's what they believe his thorn in the flesh was. And he wanted to go away. Did he believe that he could be healed? Absolutely. Why? Because he had already been blind and already been healed. That's how he was actually introduced to Jesus. He has not a lack of faith. And he prays. And what is God's answer? He says, you know what? He said, I got you. Trust me. This, even though it is not fun, it is not pleasant, this is going to be used for my glory. And if you're going to say that I am the Lord of your life, then I get to be the Lord of your life. You can't have it both ways. You say, here, you can have reign over my life. Oh, until it's something I don't like. Paul's our perfect example of where at some times we have to trust God, even when it's something that we would not choose for ourselves. So I like to ask a question, and it's not rhetorical in the sense that I don't want you to answer. I want you to answer, but I want you to answer yourself and not necessarily me. If God came up to you and asked you and told you, I would like to pour out my blessing for you, all you need to go do is get something to hold it. What would you choose to hold? God's blessing. I think, and I will speak for me, I think I sometimes would get those little communion cups. Okay, fill her up, I'm ready for my blessing. When really the correct response is to go buy one of those little giant crane things and go start digging a second Grand Canyon. Right? And say, fill it up. Because that's what our God can do. And all too often I treat God like, okay, I'm ready for my blessing. This is about right? The man asked to be healed of being blind, not for me. Let me close with this. God has done mighty things. God is doing mighty things. And God will continue to do mighty things. My prayer for all of us is that because of how mighty our God is, we will have peace and hope because our God is a mighty God. Let's pray.